Hello, welcome to the podcast. This is How to Do Better with Maya Jewell. I am a private belonging and inclusion practitioner and life coach. I'm reachable by Twitter and at Atla Coaching, ATLACOACHING. DMs are open. I am doing this because, I'm a little obsessed. Everybody's a little obsessed right now with the idea of wokeness, and the part that interests me most is wokeness as it pertains to entertainment. First, I want to define wokeness. I want to define the word woke because I think what we usually refer to as wokeness these days is not actually what the word is meant to denote. It has its roots in the Black community way back to the 1930s. I think it was Lead Belly was the musician. He's not the one who introduced the term, but he is the I think the earliest sort of documented user of the term stay woke. And that is always applied to one's individual consciousness of what was going on around you when it came to white supremacy. So for one Black person to say to another, stay woke, brother, it was, don't get bamboozled, don't go to sleep, don't get fooled by the man, don't get taken in by white supremacy, et cetera, et cetera. That was the root. And it always referred to personal consciousness, not as it's used now to kind of define other people. So there are a couple of contingents of white people who like to fight on Twitter who will fight over this word. And it never makes much sense to me because, they don't know what they're talking. Neither side pretty much knows what they're talking about most of the time. So I came to this after thinking a lot about the nonsense that erupted over, Rings of Power and House of the Dragon. And then again, once the Black Doctor Who was like, every time he shows up, there's an uproar, there's an uptick in nonsense online. And I realized my first instinct was just to go in hard on the stupidity of the whole situation, of being like really, really upset about the fact that your fantasy character is getting a remake. And what I kind of had to remember is that there is a feeling of comfort and ownership of the things that we really, really love. Now, I am a huge Jane Austen fan. Like, I've read many, many of her books. And I am deeply offended by the new Persuasion. Like, I refuse to watch it. I just do. I refuse to. I thought that Kieran Hines and Amanda Root did the definitive version, no repeats necessary. And so seeing it again, I was like, I'm good. What I didn't do was get online and complain about it, mostly because I didn't think to. And also because I just very rarely do on that kind of stuff. And I think it's partly because there's a certain amount of detachment that I've always had and I've always sort of been forced to have with these situations. But I think it's a healthy detachment because it allows me to look at the full picture, to remember that while I love Kieran Hines and I love Amanda Root, they are very old people now and people that the young folks do not know. And hardly anybody really reads Jane Austen that much anymore. I grew up during the Merchant and Ivory era. The Merchant Ivory, yeah, era, when there were just all these beautiful period pieces. And so there's a lot of Jane Austen in the air at the time. And Persuasion is a beautiful book. It is the best book that she wrote, and in my opinion, and factually. I say in my opinion, but what I really mean is factually. That's how strongly I feel about it. It is a great book, and I do think it should be something that is seen, read, experienced by younger generations. And the actors that were cast to perform, I'm sure, were the best choice. I mean, it's good. but I still feel a little put upon because it's my thing. I have a whole relationship with that book. That's the book that I realized I got me really started thinking deeply about the way that men love and the way that women love. It encouraged me because I was a late bloomer. And I also came late to the idea of partnering up with anybody. And I was a little bit scared because I was young and I knew I didn't want to get married or get involved with guys or anything like that until I'd done a lot with my life. And so that idea of patience that was sort of throughout the novel, that there's a second chance, it was really helpful to me. It was really comforting to me at important times in my life. And so I do feel a sense of ownership of it, a sense of like even entitlement to have it done the way I would like it to be done. So these days, wokeness has become, it is a, trying to think how to put it. It's like this sea monster that rises from the sea. It's this horrible thing that we should all be afraid of. It's always a little bit funny to me because most of the time when I see what people are calling wokeness, what I mostly see is diversity for dominant culture folks. So if you're white, able-bodied, straight, the diversity that's on tap is often created because most entertainment is still made prioritizing dominant culture audiences. So even when it comes to diversity, it's mostly to make people feel like they're not the kind of people who are comfortable watching a world that is all white, all straight, nobody has a disability. Everybody speaks English with an American accent. Because that's not a comfortable place to sit. But true representation is rare. It's becoming more, especially when I'm talking about your prestige series, television series, and movie series. You have a lot of, because of, oh, thank goodness for streaming, because there's such a need for content. There are a lot of like artists of color and disabled artists and ethnic artists that were able to kind of get in, and non-straight artists, LGBTQIA artists that were able to start telling their stories with their own voices. That makes all the difference because most of the representation that I see around mainstream entertainment does not actually represent me. Perfect example I would give, here's the thing. I love, what's his name? Greg Berlanti. Love him. I love how adult and how honestly reality based the relationships he writes seem. But Greg has a whiteness problem. That's more his wheelhouse. That's the wheelhouse he feels comfortable in when he's writing. Yes, I know that he has executive produced a couple of like Black series. That's great. But when I'm watching Superman and Lois, which I love, oh my gosh, I love that show, it's a little bit of a mind bender because I am watching characters that I know are not white or who I know are not like American, but they have Americanized names. They anglicized a lot of the names with when it came to ethnic characters, and that was interesting. And then they had this one Black character, and frankly, the only moment that I really had about the show when I was watching the Black characters, I was like, ooh, like, you know, oop, there it is. That's us up there. The only moment I had was the daughter's hair, the daughter of the Black character. They even named the Black guy John Henry, which is like, what? Seriously? Are we still doing that in 2022? It was hilarious. So I love the show. I do think that even that level of visibility is important because it's an acknowledgement by the creators that their audiences are not entirely formed of dominant culture. So let's get into how to do better in fandoms, Wokeness edition. Now, I do believe that every one of us struggles with the plurality of our society, struggles with all the competing needs, desires of the many different kinds of people, not just based ethnically or orientation or race, but we've always claimed to value a plurality of thought and of ideas and of worship, but it's difficult. It is difficult to make adjustments sometimes to the needs of other people in this very pluralistic society. And we do that kind of more easily for some folks than we do for others, more comfortably for some folks than we do for others. Often that's an individual thing. There are areas that I really struggle, but I always want to do better. And I might be a Pollyanna, but I really believe that the vast majority of people want to do better. And I've seen social media posts where someone has been called out, or a company or a celebrity has been called out, and they've been told to do better. And my thought is like, probably if they knew exactly how to do better, they would have done. So maybe what we need a little bit more of are specifics. I'm going to try to help people who are struggling with the way that their faves are changing to accommodate wider views of human beings in their fandoms. I do have some empathy. Not all, this is stupid fanboy logic. So that there is that piece. Because frankly, it's a little ridiculous. Let's be real. Because we all know, my first point, sharing is caring. None of these fandoms have ever been all white or all male. None of them. There have always been people of color loving these things right alongside you. There have always been women loving these things all right alongside you. There have always been disabled folks loving these things right alongside you. There have always been LGBTQIA folks loving these things right alongside you. Please do feel free to share this talk if you are so inclined. The more the merrier. I'm going to speak for myself. I am a Trekkie, I am a Whovian, and I am an MCU fangirl. I've been a Trekkie since I was like 9 years old. And I'm 48 now. So I have seen all the permutations. I cut my teeth on TOS, the original Star Trek. And I watched all of these shows. I loved all of these shows. And in spite of the fact that hardly ever do I get to see characters where I go, oh, that was so cool, I feel seen. Almost never. Because even the Black women characters that are on offer are people who are written often by white writers, and I do not recognize them as Black, or the overriding voice is white and male. And I don't recognize them. I don't recognize them. I don't see any of my friends in them. They're a character that's there to say that there's a Black woman in the story. She's often very disconnected from the main events in the story. I always say, like, pick the character that you can cut out and it not affect the story at all. That is almost always the role of Black woman. Not necessarily always, but sometimes, because sometimes the character is gay and sometimes they're a Black man and sometimes they're Asian or Latino or, ethnic or whatever. There are people in the world who live amongst all the people in the world and get to hear all the voices that speak. And then there are people who live mostly amongst people who are like them. And it is very difficult if you are a writer who has mostly lived among people who are like you to capture the voices and the spirit of people who are not perfectly. You can't do it. I can't do it. I'm a writer myself. And there are characters that I absolutely know I don't have the range for. And it's not a reflection of me being a bad writer or imaginative enough. I'm a very good writer, actually. I just recognize my limitations. But unfortunately, that has not been happening in Hollywood for the most part. So I'm going to prune a few examples. For example, in the Doctor Who universe, Mickey, The character of Mickey used to enrage me. It used to frustrate me so much, mostly because whenever there was something frightening happening and his eyes would bug out and he'd scamper behind, run, and I could hear my dad's voice in my head going, they sure know how to make a black man look afraid. And the first time I saw him run away, I thought, it's a fluke. I mean, this is the UK. They don't have the same sensibilities. And honestly, that is so regressive. We don't even do that in America that much anymore. It's done a little, but much more subtly. And so, so I'm having that conversation with myself of, it's fine, it really is. But then the second time and the third time, and then he tucked himself behind Rose one time, and I was just like, okay, I can't. It was so annoying. It was deeply offensive. And what bothered me most, looking back on Doctor Who, is that it clearly reflected the sensibility of the show, or that maybe that just that particular writer. Because even though they gave Mickey an upgrade in future shows, in future seasons, there was an episode, the invasion of the Centaurans, the Red Scott. I'm not going to remember the name of the episode. I can't believe I just forgot the name of the episode. But when the Centaurans invaded Earth and Martha Jones called the Doctor to come back to Earth, there's a moment where the military is searching the compound. They're searching the compound. They find a clone, and one of the aliens finds them finding the clone. It's a black soldier and a white soldier. The black soldier literally starts sweating and like, come on, we gotta go, let's go. And I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to say when you come into contact with a 3-foot tall Mr. Potato Head in armor. That would be reasonable. Walking, talking, Mr. Potato Head. I would be inclined to retreat myself, especially if I was supposed to be just trying to find out what's going on. But that's a sensible thing to do. But of course, the core of these stories is the bravery of the heroes. And the white guy is like, no, I'm going to check this out. And I tried to believe that it was coincidental, or that it was just like one of those things that kind of happened. But then there was the Mickey stuff of a season or two before. And I was just like, I wanted to believe it, but I couldn't. And then you had Mr. Potato Head tell the white soldier, you're so brave. You stink of fear. And I just wanted to throw something at my screen. I did not, because I like my screens. And it made me mad. But here's the thing. I still love Doctor Who. Another example, Age of Ultron. They're facing the Hulk. The Hulk has gone mad with something or other, power or something. And he's very upset. His brain has been bent by the Scarlet Witch. And he's gone wild and he's destroying everything. And you have these police officers advancing on the Hulk. Well, there are a ton of there is this ridiculous number of white cops in Nigeria. And the white cops were the only ones pretty much who were advancing on the Hulk. The black cops hung back. And I'm going, okay, take a breath, ignore it. And that's just me on 2 shows, only on the subject of fear in black men. Do not get me started on the erasure of phenotypically black women. It's not enough to be beautiful in Hollywood. It's also best to be biracial or light-skinned. And the women you see in Hollywood look almost nothing like most black women. In fact, I've always been comfortable in my upbringing with the realization that I knew women in my regular everyday life that were way more beautiful than the women I saw on TV. And I still do. And that's not me, what's the word I'm looking for? That's not me, just loving the people I'm around. That is because apart from the light skinnedness and the European features and the biraciality of the women that are elevated in Hollywood, that's really the most that many of them have to recommend themselves. But as far as beauty, but when I see beautiful women, women who could be, models, they're in my community. I'm looking at them, I'm sitting across tables from them, I'm seeing them on buses and in grocery stores. So there has always kind of been that element in Hollywood. Now, here comes the thing. What I had to realize about fan culture for dominant culture folks is that they have not had to sit and do the kind of mental gymnastics I've done all my life watching everything. They've not had to do that. They've always been able to identify more easily with the characters presented to them. And that is, and so it makes sense that people would not know, literally not know how to handle it when the fandom starts to change. I told you how I felt just because they remade Persuasion, the movie, and nothing really changed. All of the characters are still British, they're still white, they're still set in Regency England. It's still the same thing, but it's not my Persuasion anymore. And I think that's the part that is hard to accept sometimes, when something that you love and that you've always strongly identified with no longer feels like it's just yours. But the part that's also important to recognize is that it really never has been. There have always been Black fans and Indigenous fans and Asian fans and gay fans and disabled fans. There have always been these people. We've always been here in your fandoms. We've always been posting to message boards, going over the details of, how did Tony Stark get the stones off of Thanos? We're involved in those conversations as well. You just didn't know it. And isn't it fair that we should get to experience the joy of seeing ourselves on that screen as well? And I think that for most people, I don't even think most of them are bad. I don't think any of them are bad unless they're Nazis, at which point, yeah, the badness is given. But I don't think any of them are bad. I think it's just not being used to making certain adjustments and not having a lot of guidance in how to do it. So, having done it all my life, I am offering some tips. How did I manage to enjoy all this time, all the white people, in spite of the fact I am not white? How did I manage to enjoy shows in times when the very few minority characters have been replaced with a white actor? How did I enjoy it? Because believe me, I have enjoyed those things. I can't think of one right at this moment. Okay, Doctor Strange was one of them. There are a number. How did I do that? Well, first I paid attention to how the characters were like me in other ways. So I looked for their personality quirks, their interests, the things that they like. One of my favorite things about David Tennant's Doctor was, his catchphrases. Allons, I love those. And that's that was a very me thing to do when I used to be much more free and less concerned with looking cool. That was a very me thing to do. And so I could see myself in that. I'm trying to think like which MCU character I see myself probably most in Bruce Banner. Yes, because I do have a huge rage monster inside of me somewhere. I do my best. I usually manage to keep it under wraps, especially when I got older and was like, okay, I need to learn how to control my temper because I'm not a yeller, but I am a cutting truth teller when I'm mad. So I thought about Bruce Banner and his struggle to control his own emotional state for fear of breaking into the Hulk. And I kind of use that as a metaphor for myself. There are just so many ways you can see yourself in characters that don't look like you. The other part is I loved the storytelling and I loved the world building. Doctor Who is a universe that I love, that I understand. Star Trek is a universe that I love, that I know what the prime directive is. You know, I love the story arc of the MCU films. It's just so exciting and like epic and enjoyable. And so continuing to embrace what I love about it, what I already love, helps me when sometimes the writer lets me down and makes me feel bad. Remembering that no story is perfect. So when they've got it ridiculously wrong with certain characters, it helps me to remember that like there's always going to be something, you know. And in some ways I almost this is going to sound weird, but in some ways I would almost rather poor representation in some cases if the story is really really good than a flaw in some other part of the story, because then you've broken the whole story for me, as opposed to this part that I'm used to solving for in my own mind. And that's the other part, is it's more difficult for me to suspend my disbelief. It is more difficult for me when I used to watch, you know, sci-fi shows that were almost entirely white, you know. You got to understand, it's a tricky thing to be a sci-fi head in a world where the future is painted mostly white, where you're practically extinct. It's a little uncomfortable, you know? And, you know, the other part that used to bug me was, you know, we're extinct, except what percentage of the Klingons acting are black? That always irritated me so much. Put makeup on the black person, you know, because it's clearly not the talent that's the problem. Anyway, so whatever. But yeah, and griping is super helpful. Griping. I do think that there does have to be some acknowledgement, though, on the part of fans who are upset that you've really had it your own way for a very long time, kind of all your own way. And, you know, this fandom does not belong exclusively to dominant culture. It belongs to all of us who enjoy it, which means I have as much right to be seen, to feel seen by the work as you do. And it is true that I engage with a lot of work that does not make me feel seen at all. But I still love it because I love stories. And I'm not saying, oh, this makes me a better person. It only means I've had more practice. All of this stuff really is about practice. It's about getting used to something new. And the other thing that I'd say is like, you know, so you work a little harder at suspending your sense of, I would say disbelief, but it's not. But well, I should be fair. If for you it feels unbelievable to have Black, trans, wheelchair bound individuals in the thing that you love, if it feels wrong, then it just means you need to work a little harder to suspend your disbelief. Just like we suspend our disbelief about the existence of aliens, or you know, aliens that speak English. We can do it takes a little effort to turn your mind to doing that for people that you don't think should or could exist in this world that has been created. So it just, you know, a little more effort in it. The other part is know when to check out. There are shows that I've stopped watching when the white nonsense got to be too much for me. And there are shows that I only watch up to a certain point. Because, you know, I'm a rewatcher. I love to rewatch. So there are shows that I'll watch and I'll be like, okay, I do love this show, but it really goes left when they introduce this character and like make a mess of her. So I'm just gonna watch up to this point. Another thing I sometimes do is skip episodes. I regularly skip many of Martha's episodes in Doctor Who's, and I regularly skip some of Mickey's early episodes. If I'm just not in the mood to deal with trying to bend my mind around watching Martha pine for the Doctor in this really sort of gross and desperate way, that makes me feel gross and uncomfortable. She does a beautiful job, and some of my favorite episodes are in her season. like Family of Blood. Love those 2 episodes. But there are moments of hers that just cringe me out every single time. So that's what I do when I am trying to deal with the fact that my favorite thing is not as I like it to be. It's a funny, funny old world we live in, isn't it? Anyway, so that's all I've got on wokeness in fandoms and how to do better. If you'd like to come up and talk about the topic, feel free to ask questions. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So I'm going to ramble for a few minutes, give people a chance to do that if they want to. So I am really looking forward to Wakanda Forever. I'm like, it's killing me. Oh my gosh. I'm just so excited. I'm disabled. And so I'm trying to find ways to get out there into the world with all the humans with the germs. I think I'm going to have to wait. I really want to see it the first day, but I think I'm going to have to wait until my immune system recovers from the last thing I did to it. So there's that. I'll admit, like, Doctor Who has been really helpful for me because I kind of make it my mission to hate every new doctor. Because my doctor is Chris Eccleston. He's my doctor. When I found out that Christopher was leaving the series, and I was like, David Tennant? Who's this David Tennant dude? And who cares about David? Who the heck? What the heck? Look, he's got a pointy face. I'm not interested. And so then, of course, the show starts, and I'm like, oh, he's so dinky. I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. And he's what? And he's like British, Londony British, or BBC British. I don't like it. Oh gosh, I had so much fun hating him. I worked hard at it. Let me tell you. I was like, it's my job. It is my job to make them prove it to me that they can make me like a new doctor. With him, it only took an episode for me to go, oh, okay, I like him now. No second chances. That's what kind of man I am. And then who was next? Was it Matt Smith? It feels so weird to say Matt Smith because I keep feeling like, yeah, of course it was Matt Smith. Oh, that freaked me out so bad. It took a lot longer for me to like Matt Smith. Oh, it took a lot because he was so young. I was like, why does the doctor look like he's 12 years old? That's just wrong. He's like 1,000. What on earth are they trying to pull? I'm not having it. I'm a little dramatic, as you might be able to tell. So I got and I allow myself to get extremely dramatic in these situations. No holds bar. I chew the scenery like who's a really good scenery chewer? Ooh, I had a name in my head and then it went away. Christopher Walken. I choose the scenery like Christopher Walken. So I did not like Matt. I mean, I tolerated Matt. Yes, I cried at the end of, I think it was the Starship UK episode where, yeah, that one was the one where I started to love Matt Smith. I don't remember how many episodes in that was. But I was still experiencing a lot of cognitive dissonance about his age. And it was a relief, frankly, when he regenerated into Peter Capaldi because the dissonance went away. And I gave a token effort at hating Peter Capaldi, but the fact is I adore Peter Capaldi. The thick of it, in the loop, all the other things that I've seen him in over the years that are Britishy that nobody else has ever heard of, who's not also Britishy. I adore Peter Capaldi. So I tried to fake the funk. I was like, oh, new doctor. Don't like it. No new doctors. No, yeah, no me. I hate a new doctor, me. So yeah, no, I'm not gonna like this at all. There's Peter Capaldi, he's got angry eyebrows. It took no time at all. I was squeeing all over. I was like, yay! And I enjoyed him. He was great. I was like, okay, woman doctor, new doctor is a woman. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to hate her now. And I didn't know if they would, because I've always believed that that we could have a woman doctor. I mean, there's nothing that prevents it. But what with all of the pressure loaded up on simply making the doctor a different gender, I was thinking that it must be a pressure cooker both to write in and to act in, and very, very difficult to strike the right note that will please anybody, much less everybody. And so I was afraid for the show. And I also hated her because she wasn't Peter Capaldi, and I was really, really a fan of Peter Capaldi, his Scottish eyebrows, and the red lined coat of his. And I was not interested, really, in there being somebody else. So I hated her. I was like, no, I don't even like Jodie Whittaker. If you were gonna make the doctor a woman, couldn't we have picked somebody better? I'm just saying. You know, somebody. Donna would have been an amazing doctor. Wouldn't that have been insane? Oh my gosh, that would have been amazing. If like there was some weird, timey-wimey, confusing, confuzzling thing that happened, and then suddenly Donna starts to remember everything, and then instead of dying, she regenerates. Oh gosh, I would have loved that. So, that would have been awesome. But I didn't like Jodie. I was like, oh, Jodie Whittaker. No. I do not want a new doctor. I was fine with Peter Capaldi. Why do we always have to change things? So, yeah, I get quite a workout with Doctor Who on learning to appreciate new additions to my fandoms. And so the first episode, I was so emotional. Not because she was a woman, but because there was a different note struck. I felt as if Doctor Who in this era, because I haven't seen very many of the originals, but I had the sense that Doctor Who in this era was really struggling against this very like restrictive idea of what a hero needs to look like. And the Doctor is not a conventional hero. He's not conventionally brave. He's not conventionally badass. He's not conventionally smart. He's way smarter because, Time Lord. But he doesn't do the machismo thing. He doesn't, do taglines. I mean, the best tagline ever was, "This is a library. Look me up. Shadows in the library." But he doesn't do like the pithy thing. And we live in an era where we really like pithy and soundbitey and, that kind of stuff. So I always felt that the doctor was kind of struggling against what I recognized in me as a cognitive dissonance about him not showing up, like, ooh, like, I'm going to show you, but always very cooperative and that kind of stuff. And when Jodie Whittaker started, I was able to relax in a way that I hadn't before. Because there isn't an expectation for female main characters to be all macho and badass. There's an expectation that women are going to show up a little differently. And that helped me to just kind of calm down and get comfy. So that her approach was super collaborative, that it felt more ensemble-y, and she was so weird. Oh my gosh, her doctor was so strange. I fell in love. I was like, if she pulled a David Tennant on me, I was good with her by the end of the episode. I was in tears as well. I mean, there were other stories that were explored, like the Rosa Parks story. There, there are other stories that just the partition story. Oh my gosh, Pakistan and India. It was beautiful. I don't know how good it was, like representationally, but it was really beautiful. I really like the like wholehearted soppiness of of Doctor Who. Like, we just embrace the cheese. I don't care. The sentimentality, the sappiness. I'm good with it. And it's not trying to seem super smart. And while the show is very smart, it's not trying to seem like I'm the smartest person in the room, although the doctor is the smartest person in the room and says so rather often. It's just, that's not the most important thing about the doctor. The most important thing about the doctor is their humanity, right? Which is odd for a Time Lord. And here's something that I would also recommend for those who are struggling with the changes to their fandoms that are being brought about by trying to like let the shows reflect their audiences, is you might hate it. You might hate it the first time you see it. I hated Matt Smith as the doctor. I struggled with him. I didn't hate it, but I was just like uncomfortable the first time I saw it. And I just kind of, on rewatches, this is what's embarrassing. On rewatches, I would just sort of skip him. I'd be like, oh, and then there's a Matt Smith era, and go on to the more comfortable Peter Capaldi era. And then one day I was like, I feel like crying over Doctor Who. What could I cry over? And then I started listing off episodes to myself, going, yeah, Time of the Doctor is good, but I've cried over that so many times already. I don't think I could cry. I mean, it feels like I cried over it really recently too. I don't think I could work up a head of steam over it. And oh yeah, but no, that one I've seen that too many times too. What haven't I seen too many times? Oh, Starship UK. Okay, fine. So I watched the episode and cry, of course, but also fall in love with Matt Smith's doctor. Like unreservedly, like no more tension about the age. And so I found myself in the episode of Starship UK and then going back and watching his season from the beginning. And now there are times when I only watch the Matt Smith stuff because I'm just like, I'm in the mood for a Fez because Fezes are cool. And so I just watch Matt Smith and I love him. I can say from experience, sometimes giving it some space and putting the story in my mind. I didn't rewatch him, but I put his storyline in the context of the rest of the Who universe. So that when I went from like David Tennant to Peter Capaldi, I would kind of have a through line in my head. And then watching it, surprise, surprise, my feelings had shifted and I hated it less. In fact, didn't hate it, just hate it less. Loved it. And, let's be real. Like, Matt Smith gets two of the most kick-ass companions of the series, Amy Pond and Clara Oswald. They were like the coolest. They are my, well, there's Donna Noble. Donna Noble, she's in a class by herself. She's just, she's Donna Noble. But those two are like my two favorite companions. And I'd forgotten how much I loved them, how much I loved Rory and Rory's dad. Rory's dad was amazing. Ah, Mr. It's Rory's dad, Mr. Pond. Nice to meet you. And he says, and then Rory's like, his name is not Pond. He's like, yes, it is. Because, Amelia is Amelia. So there's those are the parts. I've been going on for a bit now because I guess I wanted to share that there is light at the end of the tunnel. This stuff happening doesn't mean that your fandom is ruined forever. It just means that in your mind and in your heart right now, you're grieving. You're grieving a loss. You're grieving the loss of what you had a close personal relationship with, the relationship that your fandom has grown up a little bit. Your fandom, you don't have to grow apart from your fandom. It's possible to grow with it, but you might need to take a little bit of space in some parts so that you're not like trying to force things to work when they're not working for you. And it doesn't make you a bad person that you don't like it. It's not what you're used to. Most of us don't like things that we're not used to. And so if what is upsetting you the most is a feeling like, people would blame you or hate you or think you're awful or mean or terrible if they understood how much it hurt you that your fandom is changing so much, that your fave is changing so much. Not your fandom, because your fandom hasn't changed really at all. But that your fave is changing so much. It's okay to feel those things. It's absolutely natural to feel those things. It's absolutely fair to feel those things, because this is the thing that meant something to you, that maybe when you were in like a horrible moment in your life, that in some way rescued you, gave you peace, gave you sanity, gave you insight. These are not small things. These are big deals. And so your relationship was formed in that moment at that time. And that's your connection to your fave, to our fave, shall I say. So there's no need to get mad at people on social media. It's okay to sit with the feeling of like, it's different and it's changing and I don't know where it's going to go. And I don't know if I'll still have a place in it once it's done changing. Or is it always going to keep changing? Will I keep having to adjust to it? What's the new thing going to be? It is perfectly fair to feel those feelings. You would feel them if they changed anything really major about your fave. That they're changing what some of the individuals who show up look like, that's still a fair thing to be upset about. Look, I don't know if it's an okay, I absolutely believe that, because our feelings are not things that we can reason with. Our emotions are things that exist whether we want them to or not. And change is hard. So I would invite you, if you're struggling with this, understand you're not alone, that you're not evil, and that it's okay to grieve it. And then I hope that you will engage with the rest of us fans, because we love our thing too. We want to talk about it. We still want to go into the minutia of exactly how those Infinity Stones got from Thanos' gauntlet to Iron Man's gauntlet. I'm sorry, but what I saw and the explanations I'm giving myself are not doing it for me. So I still want to talk about that stuff with you guys. But I also don't want to feel like I'm any more unwelcome in a space that I have not been welcomed in for my entire life, pretty much. So now that the fave is making me feel less unwelcome, I don't think that the fandom needs to tear itself apart trying to make me feel less welcome, because that's just not necessary. Deal with your feelings. Our feelings are really our problem. They're not other people's issue. So don't go around hurting other people because you feel hurt. Deal with your hurt. Sit with it. Talk to someone about it. Write about it. And deal with go through the process of missing what used to be. And then get back to us, because you know what? We still want you to be a part of the fandom. And I personally don't want anybody to feel left behind. I know that people will feel that way because things are changing, but we're still here. So yes, I have been geeking out. I have gone embarrassingly geeky, but I have a feeling I'm in good company. I hope that there are at least a few fellow geeks out here listening who understand my devotion, the very, very deep thought that I have given some of these topics that seem very, very trivial. I know they seem trivial, but they are so important to those of us who are geeks. We love our faves, and our faves must be rewatched and rediscussed multiple, multiple times. It makes us so happy. You don't understand. Like to argue about the thing, solve the argument, and then start all over again, either with something else or the same thing again. Anyway, so I am going to, I've rambled a bit to see if anybody wanted to come up and talk about, if you have a fave that you want to talk about, I'm here for it. And or if you would like to talk about the issue of being on a fandom, if you would like to talk to me privately, feel free to hop into my chat. I'm happy to have a quick conversation. I do this for a living, but I'm happy to have a quick conversation if this is something that you're hurting over, because I don't want anybody to feel bad about this stuff. I get that it's part of the process of getting on with it, and I'm happy to help people sit through and talk through that, because frankly, although I do care about you and your feelings, I absolutely 1,000% do. It is also true that I don't want you showing up in a way that's toxic for my folks. And so, because I have the bandwidth and the empathy to listen and to speak with you non-judgmentally, I'm happy to do it so that nobody else has to. But I also care about you. So anyway, everybody, Wakanda forever. I'm so excited. Anyway, so that's coming soon. I don't know. I feel like I've hit a stride. I feel like there are lots of things that I would like to how to do better. I've done 2 in one day today. Please feel free to check out my talks. I did one on interracial dating recently. I did one on the how to do better in fandoms, the Wakanda Forever edition, because I knew that there are some people who have concerns about, like, ooh, I don't want to be disrespectful, which, it's really sweet of you to worry, but it's not that deep. I'm trying to think, where are the recent wisdoms? Oh, empowerment. The one that I did before that was about speaking more, it leans towards women about how to be empowered. So feel free to check them out. Feel free to follow me, and feel free to leave me questions on either in the questions and answer section or in my chat. Anyway, we're headed for winter, folks. Take care of yourself. Get your vitamin C and your veggies, because it's going to be a wild one health-wise for a lot of us. And I will see you next time. Take care. Maya out.